The best of goodbyes.
NBR is produced in association with Reuters, the world's largest electronic publisher, which provides NBR with news, market data, and communication services worldwide. And is made possible by A.G. Edwards, providing personalized financial services and investment advice to individuals and businesses. A.G. Edwards, a century-old tradition of service to investors. The Franklin Templeton Group's mutual funds include tax-free municipal securities funds, U.S. government securities funds, international growth funds, and money market funds. Digital, an information technology company putting imagination to work. And by the financial support of viewers like you. The next generation will soon inherit $7 trillion. Whether you're planning to leave property or inherit it, you need NBR's latest video, How to Plan Your Estate or Inheritance. To order by credit card, call 1-800-535-5864.
Local sponsorship of Nightly Business Report is made possible by a grant from Dane Bosworth Incorporated, serving the investment needs of public broadcasting viewers in Portland, Bend, Eugene, Salem, and Medford. Dane Bosworth Incorporated.
These are the television stations of OPB, Oregon Public Broadcasting.
Our local broadcast of the MacNeil, Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by Davis Wright Tremaine, a law firm serving businesses and individuals from offices in Oregon, Washington, California, Idaho, Alaska, and Washington, D.C.
Good evening. I'm Jim Lehrer in Washington.
And I'm Charlene Hunter-Gault in New York. After the news summary, the Clinton compromise on gays in the military, we get 4 views. Next, the president's firing of FBI Director William Sessions. Was it justified? We have a debate. And finally, correspondent Elizabeth Brackett updates the battle to hold back the waters along the Mississippi River.
Major funding for the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by the Archer Daniels Midland Company, ADM, supermarket to the world. And by New York Life, yet another example of New York Life's wise investment philosophy. And by PepsiCo. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
President Clinton today announced his plan for homosexuals to serve in the military, a way he called an honorable compromise. Gays would not be asked about their sexual orientation, but they would not be allowed to declare it once in the service. Homosexual activity would continue to be prohibited, but there would be no more witch hunt investigations. He said it balanced the rights of individuals and the needs of the military. The president spoke about the plan this afternoon in the White House briefing room. He was asked if the plan would still force homosexuals to remain in the closet.
No, it will not necessarily require them to stay in the closet. The policy as written gives people a limited right, obviously, to express their sexual orientation. But if they do so, they are at risk of having to demonstrate in some credible way that they are observing the rules of conduct applied in the military service. That is much more than they had before. Over and above that, the investigative rules, which are part of the policy, go far beyond anything that was written in law before in terms of respecting the privacy and associational rights of homosexuals in the military service. They are, and others, and non-homosexuals, heterosexuals in the military.
The president's plan goes into effect October 1st. We'll have more on the story right after this news summary. Charlene?
President Clinton fired FBI Director William Sessions today, ending a 6-month power struggle between the director and the White House. The president said Sessions could no longer lead the agency effectively. Sessions was accused of ethical lapses earlier this year by the Justice Department. He met with Attorney General Janet Reno on Saturday, but refused her request that he resign. Today, Sessions said he was sad to be leaving under these circumstances and denied violating ethical rules. The president is expected to announce a replacement as early as tomorrow. We'll have more on the story later in the program. Former House Postmaster Robert Rhoda pleaded guilty today to embezzling federal money and giving it to congressmen. In a plea agreement read by prosecutors, Rhoda admitted to participating in a scheme with unnamed lawmakers that allowed them to use their office postage accounts to get thousands of dollars in cash. Rhoda faces up to 3 years in prison, but is not expected to get the maximum because he is cooperating with the continuing investigation.
President Clinton added Nebraska and South Dakota today to the list of states declared disaster areas because of floods. The Mississippi River crested downstream at St. Louis. It hit a record 46.9 feet overnight and then began receding. Most of the city remained dry, but a levee break left South St. Louis under 10 feet of water. Workers in Quincy, Illinois worked at opening a key bridge across the Mississippi. It was the last working bridge for 200 miles when flooding forced it to close this weekend. And in Des Moines, Iowa, water began flowing through the city's pipes for the first time since the waterworks were flooded a week ago. City officials said it was still not safe to drink. We'll have more on the flooding later in the program.
Japanese Prime Minister Kiichi Miyazawa rejected calls from his party for his resignation today. Miyazawa's Liberal Democrat Party lost its 38-year parliamentary majority in weekend elections. Miyazawa lost an earlier vote of no confidence and was expected to step down after the election. But he said today he would make a decision before Parliament votes for a new prime minister within a month.
United Nations envoy Rafa Kea said today he had resolved the dispute with Iraq over weapons monitoring. He gave no details, but said there was no longer any reason for military action. We have a report from Baghdad by Robert Moore of Independent Television News.
It was a final diplomatic mission, an attempt to mend the fraying relationship between Iraq and the United Nations. This morning, after 4 days of tough talking and brinkmanship, Iraq appears to have made the crucial concession. Tariq Aziz, Iraq's deputy prime minister, agreeing to the concept of long-term monitoring of the country's weapons systems. For Rafa Kea, the satisfaction he has almost certainly averted UN-backed military action against Iraq. Other issues remain in dispute, but a new framework for settling them is now said to be in place.
I wouldn't say that we have a clear-cut settlement, but I think we are on the way to break out of that almost quite dangerous situation.
For the last 2 weeks, ordinary Iraqis have been living in fear of a fresh missile or air attack. But with the crisis diffused and compliance agreed on, there is now growing hope the UN will consider lifting sanctions. That may take time, but for now at least, Iraqis are under no immediate external threat. Nevertheless, from bitter experience, the UN here is still officially cautious. But privately, they are hopeful this has been the long-awaited diplomatic breakthrough, an end to the vicious circle of non-compliance and military action.
North Korea today agreed to resume talks with the International Atomic Energy Agency. The communist regime has long been suspected of developing a nuclear bomb. Today's announcement was made in Geneva after a meeting with U.S. officials. North Korea pledged to abide by international safeguards for nuclear non-proliferation and to discuss nuclear issues with South Korea. In return, the United States promised to help North Korea change its nuclear power program to one less easily adapted to weapons production.
In South Africa today, gunmen with assault rifles executed 6 commuters on a van. The attack took place outside Johannesburg and followed a weekend of other black factional violence that claimed 22 lives. Meanwhile, a new round of power-sharing talks began today, despite a boycott by black and white conservatives. Both the Inkatha Freedom Party and the pro-apartheid Conservative Party are refusing to attend to protest a plan to hold the country's first multiracial elections next April. That's it for the news summary. Just ahead on the News Hour, gays in the military, the FBI firing, and the Midwest floods.
President Clinton's decision on homosexuals in the military is our lead story tonight. Our coverage begins with this extended excerpt from the president's announcement made before a military audience at the National Defense University in Washington this afternoon.
Clearly, the American people are deeply divided on this issue, with most military people opposed to lifting the ban because of the feared impact on unit cohesion, rooted in disapproval of homosexual lifestyles, and a fear of invasion of privacy of heterosexual soldiers who must live and work in close quarters with homosexual military people. We now have a policy that is a substantial advance over the one in place when I took office. I have ordered Secretary Ashman to issue a directive consisting of these essential elements. 1, servicemen and women will be judged based on their conduct, not their sexual orientation. 2, therefore, the practice, now 6 months old, of not asking about sexual orientation in the enlistment procedure will continue. 3, an open statement by a service member that he or she is a homosexual will create a rebuttable presumption that he or she intends to engage in prohibited conduct, but the service member will be given an opportunity to refute that presumption. In other words, to demonstrate that he or she intends to live by the rules of conduct that apply in the military service. And 4, all provisions of the Uniform Code of Military Justice will be enforced in an even-handed manner as regards both heterosexuals and homosexuals. And thanks to the policy provisions agreed by the Joint Chiefs, there will be a decent regard to the legitimate privacy and associational rights of all service members. Just as is the case under current policy, unacceptable conduct, either heterosexual or homosexual, will be unacceptable 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from the time a recruit joins the service until the day he or she is discharged. Now, as in the past, every member of our military will be required to comply with the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is federal law and military regulations at all times and in all places. Let me say a few words now about this policy. It is not a perfect solution. It is not identical with some of my own goals, and it certainly will not please everyone, perhaps not anyone, and clearly not those who hold the most adamant opinions on either side of this issue. But those who wish to ignore the issue must understand that it is already tearing at the cohesion of the military, and it is today being considered by the federal courts in ways that may not be to the liking of those who oppose any change. And those who want the ban to be lifted completely on both status and conduct must understand that such action would have faced certain and decisive reversal by the Congress, and the cause for which many have fought for years would be delayed, probably for years. Thus, on grounds of both principle and practicality, this is a major step forward. It is, in my judgment, consistent with my responsibilities as President and Commander-in-Chief to meet the need to change current policy. It is an honorable compromise that advances the cause of people who are called to serve our country by their patriotism, the cause of our national security, and our national interest in resolving an issue that has divided our military and our nation and diverted our attention from other matters for too long.
Now, reactions to and perspectives on the president's action. To congressional, to military. Congressman Barney Frank is a Democrat of Massachusetts. Congressman Duncan Hunter is a Republican of California. Tanya Dami is a former Army captain, executive director of the Military Freedom Project of the Gay and Lesbian Task Force. Bob McGinnis is a recently retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. Until his retirement, he worked on the gays in the military issue with the Army Inspector General's office. He's now a member of the Defense Readiness Council, a group that opposes lifting the homosexual ban. Congressman Frank, beginning with you, is it an honorable compromise, as the president says it is?
Well, it's not an acceptable one to me. I don't criticize President Clinton. I think he has done the best that he could in a very difficult situation. But it falls short of what I thought was necessary. It still says that anywhere, anytime, any place that you express your sexuality, you can, if you are gay or lesbian, be kicked out. It makes it much less likely that you will be. In other words, it improves, in my judgment, in practice on the policy, but it continues to have a statement which the military leadership itself admits isn't true. Namely, we've had military leaders acknowledge that there have been plenty of gay men and lesbians who have been superb members of the military. And this policy says, yeah, but if we find that out, we kick you out. It makes it less likely that it will be found out. It makes it harder for people to be persecuted, but it still is in principle the wrong policy, and for that reason I was disappointed by it. But I add again, not by the president. I think Bill Clinton, in the face of a lot of political opposition and a lot of bigotry, did the best that could have been done. Unfortunately, in the end, that for me was not good enough.
Congressman Hunter, do you see it as an honorable compromise coming at it from the other side?
I think it's going to be totally unworkable. I think it'll create a bonanza for lawyers. I've read some of the text, and I think it's going to lead to numerous lawsuits. And beyond that, I think that it will hurt the military badly, because the military depends on middle America sending their sons and daughters into the service. And if they perceive, and I think many of them will, that the military is not what they consider to be a wholesome environment for their kids, they're going to stop sending their kids. And I take a little difference with my colleague as a member of the infantry myself, and listening to a lot of testimony. Very few people in the combat arms, and I'm talking about infantry and armor and those arms where it's most difficult to get volunteers. Very few of those people have come forward and stated that they're homosexual. To my knowledge, no Medal of Honor winners out of the hundreds and hundreds that we have said that they are homosexual. So I think that we're embarking on something to accommodate President Clinton's political promise that is going to damage the military.
How do you respond to that, Congressman Frank, that even with your reservations about it, if it goes forward in the form the president has proposed, at least according to Congressman Hunter, it's going to hurt the military?
Oh, I think people like Congressman Hunter greatly exaggerate the amount of prejudices out there. At the same time, they try, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy for them. They whip up the prejudice at the same time as they decry it. The notion that people haven't come forward more to say that they are gay or lesbian, obviously they haven't. They'd get kicked out. What we have are a lot of people who, after they have been in, have acknowledged being gay or lesbian. So his citation of the fact that he didn't know anybody when he was in the infantry who volunteered it, of course not. People paid a very, very high price for that. I think people have consistently exaggerated the extent of prejudice against gay men and lesbians. We're talking about people who are prepared to do what anybody else does in the military. We are talking about people who are prepared to abide by every other rule that anybody else does. And what we're told is the very knowledge that someone else is gay, not having seen or heard or been the victim of any kind of advance, but the simple knowledge that there is a gay person in the room with you will somehow drive people to distraction. Fortunately, I think that is a gross exaggeration of the amount of prejudice that exists in this society.
Well, Jim, I think the one group that the president should have listened to are the young men and women who serve in uniform, and most of them have responded that they don't want to have to serve in close quarters with homosexuals for long periods of time. That's the one group the president didn't listen to.
Well, here, we have not had the military run by, and I'm not sure exactly what the overall numbers were, but a majority would probably come out that way, but not everybody. But that criterion would have kept the military from being racially integrated. If you had asked, and the policies are different in some ways, but if you had asked the existing white soldiery and the sailors in 1948, what do you want? They would have said, don't integrate. If you would ask the all-male military years ago, do you want women involved? They would have said no. No, we haven't decided that we will run American military policy by polling the enlisted people. And I hope we don't. I don't think that's a good way to run military policy.
But a majority of young black people who are enlisted have said that they don't want to be forced to serve with homosexuals.
And a majority of white people in 1948 would have said that they wouldn't have integrated the military.
I don't think you can call those young black people bigoted, Barney.
Who did?
I don't think you can.
No, I called you bigoted, Duncan.
Well, I don't think you can say that.
I don't think that they were.
Well, there's about 95% of them has said that they don't want to serve with homosexuals.
No, that 95% figure is simply made up by you.
That's
there was no figure of 95% that has said that.
That is not made up. That's exactly what the figures are.
Where's the figure that 95% of the
Los Angeles Times poll.
That 95% of the blacks said that?
95% of the enlisted people, about 30% of whom are blacks. So you have a large minority, including blacks and Filipinos, who don't want to serve with homosexuals. I think we should listen to those people.
Well, do you think we should listen to the military in every issue? Should we have listened to the white military in 1948?
I think when you have, my answer is I think when young people come in and they give so much of their lives, I think you should give them a little sensitivity to their sense of privacy.
But now let me ask you a question. Should we poll the military men and ask whether women should be allowed a greater role? Is that policy only for gay men and lesbians, or is that the policy?
I think that the military decided that they should be given a greater role, and they have been given a greater role.
They didn't have a poll. The military didn't decide that.
We have two former
from outside.
We have two former military people.
We'll give it back to you for a while here.
Yeah, okay. Let's listen to these two former military people who see it very differently. Colonel McGinnis, your objections to lifting the ban aside, is what the president outlined today workable? Well, can the military make that work?
You know, the president said that subject to good leadership and proper training, that he has every confidence that the military can make this work. But I think there are some problems, and I heard Duncan Hunter bring these up, specifically investigations. We're very concerned on how the investigations might be started. In the past, all we had to have is credible evidence, and that was defined by the litmus test, which most everyone has heard about. Now it looks as if there's...
What do you mean?
Well, acknowledgement of being a homosexual acts, or acknowledgement of marrying or attempting to marry. Now, that was the litmus test. In the future, what is going to be the standard for initiation of investigations? It looks as if it has been considerably strengthened against doing, investigations that commanders routinely have done in the past. So we will find, as a result of this change, I think, a dramatic downturn on the number of administrative and judicial discharges as a direct result.
And you see that as a bad thing?
Well, I see it as a bad thing only because I believe that the introduction of homosexuals into the military potentially brings some risk with it. Now, this is already established in the tort law, specifically the analytical principle called the assumption of the risk. If there's a risk, you assume the risk. Don't be surprised when the risk materializes. We've gone through the arguments time and again. The medical risks, certainly 1,580 HIV-positive people in the military today, 3 battalions worth, clearly, according to our own surveys, have indicated that they acquired HIV through homosexual encounters. We also are concerned about the retention and the recruitment issue. The surveys are right. We're concerned
of heterosexuals.
Of the people that are currently in and the people that might potentially come in. 75% of the people that are in the pool of people that we might draw from to fill the 1.7 million military, they're telling us, we're not sure we want to come in because of this decision. Whether we like that or not, whether it's conservative or liberal, doesn't matter. We have an obligation to fill the military to defend the country. Certainly we're concerned about that. We're concerned about cohesion, and we've heard thousands of times about various cases. Certainly the American Security Council's Foundation survey of last month looked at 1,040 generals and admirals, active duty, and it said 99.6% agree that this is going to damage cohesion.
Let's go through those with Captain Dami now. Okay, first of all, the question about investigations. You heard what the Colonel said about that. But how do you read this policy and how it will be affected?
Well, I share concerns as well, believe it or not, but I disagree with the Colonel, being that I was a former military police officer. I did work in investigations. I believe because now the standard will be for misconduct, that commanders will have a vested interest in proving a pretty good case on a soldier, and that, in fact, will become much more punitive in nature, resulting in more discharges that would be other than honorable or courts-martials.
Take me through that. How do you think that might happen?
Well, I have some concerns about the inconsistency that has been articulated in the policies that's been explained to us, that one could go to a gay bar, but when one was at a gay bar, they couldn't necessarily hold the hand of another woman, as in my case, or dance with that woman.
That would be a violation of the new policy,
that's
as
right.
you see it.
That's right. If one could read gay literature, but they couldn't necessarily tell a colleague or a friend in confidence that they were gay, there's some clear inconsistencies. And so I, too, share Colonel McGinnis's concern, and having been a company commander, I know that you have to establish a probable cause for investigation. When does it become a probable cause, and where do we draw the lines? From my standpoint of having been in the military, I think it's going to be an undue burden on commanders, and I fear for really, even though Congressman Frank and I are on the same side on this issue, I fear for increased witch hunts, because the outcome could be much more punitive now under this policy.
Is that a possibility, Colonel, that a commander could, well, you heard what she said. Has she got a legitimate fear, even though she comes at it from a different point of view than you do?
Well, it's legitimate, I think, in terms of, it depends upon how you characterize witch hunts. There was a so-called witch hunt that was characterized by the homosexual community in Texas. It took place last May, in which 60 homosexuals were captured on video camera in a latrine next to a child care center. These people were kicked out of the Army subsequently, but they were caught in the act of anal and oral sodomy. Clearly a violation of Article 125. We would not have initiated that investigation had we followed the prescribed outline that the President has now given us.
Well, that was a sting operation run at Fort Hood, Texas, and the majority of those people that were arrested eventually, in fact, were married men. A lot of them had families. Mm-hmm. So this is what happens. People get forced into the closet, the bigotry, the prejudice exists, and people seek out, unfortunately, in inappropriate ways where they would get the services of somebody else.
Let's go to his second point, Captain, which was that this will discourage a lot of people from going into the military.
Well, I don't share that. Conclusion. I think that people will continue to go into the military because it's always been access for many Americans to get higher education and to get job skills. And with the economy as it is right now, it's pretty stagnant. People are going to continue to go in. People will continue to seek out the military, and maybe even some for devotion to country. And if they're not going to come in because of this policy, then perhaps that's probably best. In the long run, I think the President wants to set a standard of how people should be treated. I agree with Congressman Frank. It's not anywhere near where we want it, but he has attempted to move this issue forward.
What about the unit cohesion issue? You're a former company commander. You heard what the Colonel said.
Well, everyone says right now that unit cohesion would be denigrated by allowing openly gay and lesbian people to serve. But in fact, every study that's been commissioned by the Department of Defense, including the Government Accounting Office's report, has indicated that it should be lifted and that it is only mere speculation on the part of people. And we know, and the Colonel does know this as well, is that positive leadership is the example by which military people follow.
She's right about that, isn't it? Can't a military leader affect this very dramatically?
A military leader can affect a lot of things. We had the best leadership we've ever had in this country during Desert Storm in the 91 operation. During that same period, our own records indicate that the criminal sexual conduct problem with discovered homosexuals was 8-to-1 for heterosexual. That sends a very clear message. Now, Tanya talked about the Crittenden study in 57, the Perserex study in 89 and 91, and also the recent RAND study. The Crittenden study clearly said that they don't know what the answer is. They're not sure whether or not it's a blackmail or a security problem. They say, though, that it's like schizophrenia or manic depression or whatever. The Perserex study, interestingly, advocates the possible recruiting of AIDS-positive, HIV-positive people into the military. Those types of studies are seriously flawed, and they've been debunked already. So I would not rely upon that conclusively to support any argument, because they just aren't good studies.
Look, back to the Congressman, beginning with you, Congressman Hunter. From your perspective, is this over? In other words, the President tried to work out something. He said, as we ran on the tape, that both sides who feel strongly, as you do on one side, Congressman Frank on the other, the Captain and the Colonel here, nobody's happy with this. But has he resolved it, or do you believe there will be a serious effort in Congress to go back to the original ban and make that the law of the land?
No, I think there will be a serious effort to undo what the President has done with this directive. And I think that the men and women of the armed services who don't want to see this change made are going to have to rely primarily on Senator Sam Nunn, who made a fairly strong floor speech on Friday that laid out a policy that is quite a bit different from the policy that the president has come up with. So there will be a battle, and I think that that the real key, the real thing that the House Armed Service and Senate Armed Services committees have to ask is, will Middle America continue to send their young kids into the military if they perceive that the military has changed? And I don't think they're going to buy this deal that the president has come out with.
Senator Nunn issued a statement late this afternoon which said he was positively disposed toward what the president announced. He said that he wanted to look at the details, but that at this point he felt that he felt positive about it. Congressman Frank, how do you read that? How do you read Senator Nunn's reaction, and how do you read how important that is?
Well, Senator Nunn and I haven't read each other all that well, and I think we need simultaneous translation. But I will say in the House that I think with the Joint Chiefs having said this is the policy they like, that's probably what will be sustained. And I'll tell you the reason, although, as I said, I would have preferred the president to have gone for something better, although I think that, in honesty, that would have lost. The inconsistency here is, I think, what's going to help. The colonel said, and Duncan Hunter said, well, they won't send, the people don't want to serve if they know there are gay people around. Therefore, if there are gay people around who are trying hard not to come out, we will drag them out. We will investigate them. We will go after them. And therefore, people will be appalled at knowing they're there. The colonel is upset.
That's
because,
not what we said
please
at
let
all.
me finish. Please let me finish.
Well,
the colonel said,
don't mischaracterize.
all right, I'll leave you
my
out of
statement.
this. I'll talk about the colonel.
Thank you.
The colonel said that, oh, we won't be able to do investigations. Well, if in fact you are motivated by a sense that people will be upset if they know gay people are around, and I think people have exaggerated that prejudice, but if that's what you're worried about, then why do you insist on investigating? If people are going out of their way not to announce that they're gay or lesbian, the colonel's problem is that we can't investigate and drag them out to offend people. I think what that shows is a sense of people who are motivated, frankly, more by a bias and an unwillingness to give people a chance to play by the same rules as everybody else.
Now, let me make a statement on that, Barney. I think the reason that...
Congressman, wait a minute. He's talking about what the colonel said, so let's let the colonel respond.
You know, the president gave us 6 months to look at this, and we have. We've looked at absolutely thousands of vignettes from commanders all over the world, and we asked, tell us about where you've discovered someone that's homosexual and what impact that had on your unit. And you wouldn't believe the tragedies that we heard. Yeah, there are exceptions, but
Colonel,
by and large,
what about the congressman's point? The congressman's point is that why do you want to find out if it does that to the unit? In other words,
you're the one.
We didn't have to
bring
find
it out.
It just naturally came to a head. And
No,
that's
Colonel,
the
you try to
unfortunate
investigate
aspect
it.
of all this. As soon as we discovered or someone did something that perpetrated a problem in that unit. You know, I can give you an example where I was in a unit where this happened, and it really undermined the effectiveness of the unit once it was discovered.
let me ask the captain one final question.
I would just say,
from your point of view, are you going to leave this alone, or is your group going to press in the courts for a broader ban?
Well,
a broader lifting of the ban?
Of course, we're going to join with our coalition partners. This is going to be in the courts. I mean, Monday, Sergeant Tom Panacea's case will be in front of the federal court in Phoenix, and the Meinhold and Stefan briefs must be filed by the 29th. And we're going to work on the Hill. We're going to work on fighting back any codification attempt by Senator Nunn. And we'll continue to press, and we'll continue to be visible. We are not going away. Our movement isn't going away. And gay and lesbian people will continue to be part of America, and we'll continue our fight for social justice.
Jim, I think that it's very clear that there will be lots of court cases on this, and I think that's part of the Clinton strategy. They've opened the door a little bit. I think that both sides concur that there's lots of ambiguities, lots of room for court cases. We're going to make a lawyer's paradise out of the military.
All those court cases were already filed. That's nonsense. The court cases have already been filed.
There will be hundreds of court cases filed on this new language.
I think there
will be equal protection cases filed.
I think we have an area of agreement. Everybody agrees this didn't end it today. Thank you all very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Still ahead, the fired FBI director and battling the floods. The other big story in Washington today is the firing of FBI Chief William Sessions. That's where we turn next. On Saturday, Attorney General Janet Reno asked for Sessions' resignation, but the beleaguered Sessions publicly refused to resign. That led to today's showdown between the president and Sessions. Sessions was halfway through a 10-year term, but the FBI director serves at the pleasure of the president. The former federal judge was appointed by President Reagan, but came under attack for alleged ethical abuses as FBI chief. In January, a Justice Department report initiated by former Attorney General William Barr accused Sessions of ethical lapses. Here's an excerpt of today's announcement by President Clinton.
In recent months, serious questions have been raised about the conduct and the leadership of the Director of the FBI, William Sessions. Among other matters, the Department's Office of Professional Responsibility has issued a report on certain conduct by the Director. I asked the Attorney General, Janet Reno, to assess the Director's tenure and the proper response to the turmoil now in the Bureau. After a thorough review by the Attorney General of Mr. Sessions' leadership of the FBI, she has reported to me in no uncertain terms that he can no longer effectively lead the Bureau and law enforcement community. I had hoped very much that this matter could be resolved within the Justice Department. The Attorney General met with Judge Sessions over the weekend and asked him to resign, but he refused. In accord with the recommendation of the Attorney General, with which I fully agree, I called Director Sessions a few moments ago and informed him that I was dismissing him effective immediately as the Director of the FBI. We cannot have a leadership vacuum at an agency as important to the United States as the FBI. It is time that this difficult chapter in the agency's history is brought to a close.
Mr. President, are you, for one, what did he do wrong? And are you confident that there was not an internal vendetta against Judge Sessions because he wanted to broaden the look of the FBI, take in more Hispanics, blacks, and women?
Well, let me answer the second question first. I think that will be remembered as the best thing about his tenure. And he deserves the support and thanks to the American people for trying to broaden the membership of the FBI, to make it look more like America, and to follow the lead of some other agencies and the United States military. Now, but beyond that, if you read the report of the Office of Professional Responsibility and you do what the Attorney General did, if you look at that and all the other circumstances, and you assess the capacity of the present director to lead, or the incapacity of the director to lead, she reached the judgment, which she communicated to me, that he ought to resign, and I fully agreed with that judgment. There are lots of reasons for it.
Shortly after the president announced his dismissal, former FBI Director Sessions talked with reporters.
When I came to Washington nearly 6 years ago, I was challenged by the Senate Judiciary Committee to continue the movement for change begun by Directors Kelly and Webster within the Bureau. The opportunities for women, blacks, Hispanics, and other minorities have been greatly expanded. The possibility for service and promotion within the Bureau could now be limitless. In addition, I have led the FBI to what I call astounding accomplishments in the counterterrorism area, the counterintelligence area, the DNA and fingerprint technologies, and in the battle against gangs, drugs, violent crime, and white-collar fraud. Throughout my tenure, I have been keenly aware of the high level of trust placed in me by the American people. Now, because of what I would term scurrilous attacks on myself and on my wife of 42 years, it has been decided by others, and now you know by the President of the United States, that I can no longer be as forceful as I need to be in leading the Federal Bureau of Investigation and carrying out my responsibilities to the Bureau and to the nation. It is because I believe in the principle of an independent FBI that I have refused to voluntarily resign. I will speak out in the strongest terms about protecting the FBI from being manipulated and politicized both from inside and from out.
President Clinton is expected to name a successor to head the agency tomorrow. We take a look at the decision to fire Sessions and ask, was it justified? Congressman Don Edwards, Democrat of California, is a member of the House committee that oversees the FBI. George Terwilliger is the former Deputy Attorney General under William Barr. He oversaw the Office of Professional Responsibility, which wrote the report investigating Sessions' ethics on the job. And starting with you, Mr. Terwilliger, was President Clinton's move today in firing William Sessions justified?
I think it was, Charlene. The issue comes down to what's best for the FBI and best for the country, and I think it's on that basis that the President made his decision. The institution is one of the most important ones in our government and indeed in our nation, and we simply can't have a situation where there is disarray and a deep-seated morale problem that was caused by this lingering situation with the director.
What do you say to that, Congressman Edwards? Was it justified?
Well, I'm certainly not going to criticize the President or the Attorney General. It's their call, not mine. And I think that the important thing to remember is that the 20,000 agents of the employees of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the American people are better off for having Director Sessions there for 6 years. The FBI is an enormously improved institution. Director Sessions ticked off a number of the improvements that have been made under his command, and there actually were more than that. The organization is a better place for having Director Sessions. I'm sorry to see him go, but it's a decision that I had nothing to do with, and I certainly accept it.
But in your position, I mean, you heard the president cite his reasons. He said there were serious questions about his leadership, that Mr. Sessions can no longer effectively lead the Bureau and the law enforcement community. Do you agree with that part?
Well, certainly the FBI has done some tremendously wonderful things in the last few years, and especially in the last months of Director Sessions' reign. They arrested the alleged bombers of the World Trade Center within a very few days. They solved the problem of other terrorists in New York, arrested a whole group of them, and another in Los Angeles just a few weeks ago of skinheads who were heavily armed.
Excuse me, but on the other hand, the president did say that there was a leadership vacuum there and that the agency was, in effect, adrift, a deep morale problem.
I am perfectly satisfied with what the president said. I think the world of both the Attorney General and the President. It's their decision, and I support them.
Mr. Terwilliger, let me ask you this. What, in terms, you were part of the investigation, leading the investigation that recommended this move many months ago now, but what do you think of how it happened today? The President abruptly called Mr. Sessions back from a meeting in Chicago where he was to address FBI agents at lunch and at dinner. Was this handled in the right way?
That's difficult for me to judge. It was certainly an awkward situation overall, Charlene, and one would have hoped that it all could have gone smoother. But the director, apparently by his own statements today, has steadfastly refused to resign despite requests relayed through the Attorney General from the President that he do so. That's fairly astounding in and of itself to me. I think if the President indicates to a high government official that it's time to go, then it's time to go, absent some very articulable, inappropriate reason for the request.
What about that, Congressman Edwards, the abrupt calling back and so on, and the refusal, prompted in part by the refusal of Mr. Sessions to step down? How do you think that part of it was handled?
Well, that has been handled in a mixed way by everybody over the past 3 months, but it was handled so badly by former Attorney General Barr, who brought this report out, gave it to reporters, didn't even clue in the director himself. And I'm not going to disagree with anything in the report, but let me point out that there was no hint of criminal conduct in anything. And I think that we ought to concentrate on the future of the FBI and all the fine people in it. They're better off because Director Sessions was here, and I hope that the new director, whoever he or she is, will carry on in the same tradition of good change, moving forward.
But what about Mr. Sessions' refusal to step down? Did he do the right thing? I mean, he said the reason he did it was he wanted to uphold the principle of an independent FBI, but you heard Mr. Terwilliger say that was an amazing thing for him to do. What do you think about that?
Well, it's very important that there be an FBI director that is not only independent, And remember, I'm a veteran of Watergate. I was on the impeachment committee of Richard Nixon, where we did not have an independent FBI, and they were corrupted by the White House. You must have, if we're going to have a real FBI, he must be independent.
Well, do you think that the firing of Mr. Sessions in any way compromises that or bodes ill for that?
Well, the law is that only the president can fire the FBI director. And I presume that Director Sessions felt that if he resigned, he would be admitting something. He has been very steadfast in admitting or in fighting back and not agreeing that he had done anything wrong. However, I'm not judging the report. That is up to the president and Janet Reno.
Mr. Terwilliger, what about Mr. Sessions' defense of not stepping down, that he wanted to uphold the principle of an independent FBI? Do you think that that is in any way being affected now or negatively by this whole matter?
In all honesty, I don't, Charlene. I really think that's a red herring, and perhaps Judge Sessions providing himself with a little bit of dignity on the way out, which he certainly deserves. And I do agree with Congressman Edwards, as we all did, that he did some positive things for the FBI. And I think the American people can take confidence from the way this was handled going back to our days in the Bush administration. We were handed a report conducted by the Office of Professional Responsibility, career people at the Department of Justice, which indicated that the director of the FBI had engaged in some serious wrongdoing, not criminal, to be sure, but the same kind of wrongdoing that would get an agent on the bricks, as Congressman Edwards once was, severely disciplined. We took the action that we thought was appropriate, reprimanding the director and asking him to pay back certain funds to the department for inappropriate use of an airplane and automobile and so forth. We left it to the new administration to make a decision, since they were the ones that were going to have to live with his tenure, as to whether or not he should continue. I think, although it seemed to have taken a long time, they made a deliberate, careful analysis of their own, of the facts that were in the report and the overall situation, and drew the conclusion that it was time for a change. I don't think it does the FBI or the nation any good for Congressman Edwards to try to make a political issue out of this.
Although Attorney General Janet Reno said that the biggest problem that Mr. Sessions had was the agency's performance and his hands-off management style. That seemed to weigh more heavily in the decision that she made to recommend his termination than the other matters that had been previously brought up.
Well, what I saw the president's remarks, Charlene, he indicated it was a combination of things, and I do think that there was some dissatisfaction with the level of leadership and the degree of leadership that Director Sessions was carrying on. But what was on our plate was, in fact, these ethical violations, and we left those other matters for the new administration to consider.
Congressman Edwards, what about the suggestion that Mr. Sessions may have been the victim of an internal vendetta within from within the FBI, that many of them never liked him, that his efforts at reform to make the FBI look more like America, fighting discrimination, may have had something to do with it? What is your sense of this?
I don't think it had a lot to do with it, but there was dissatisfaction amongst some of the agents and the employees when Director Sessions insisted on forming a new Office of Fair Employment and insisting that there be goals and timetables for hiring more women, more blacks, more Asians. Very important to have Asians today, and more Hispanics. So, but there were people in the Bureau that liked him a lot, and like in any organization, there were some who didn't like him.
But it's said that by many reports that I saw today that he had few supporters within the Bureau.
He had quite a number of supporters. A lot of them didn't want to go public. They felt that there was a risk, but we have quite a list of very strong supporters. And as a matter of fact, I've gotten a lot of mail since the argument first started, and 95% of it's very favorable, and a lot of it's from the Department of Justice employees.
The administration had said that it wanted to avoid a messy fight, which is exactly what finally happened. How is this going to affect the ability of the next director, who is said to be, the president is planning to appoint tomorrow? How do you think this is going to affect the agency itself and the ability of the next person, whoever it is, to handle it?
Well, I would hope that the message doesn't get out that he was removed because there was a cabal. I reject that. It would be a terrible thing if the new director came in and there was a feeling in the higher echelons of the FBI that by expressing dissatisfaction and rumor mongering that they could somehow get rid of this director. That's certainly something we never want, and I don't think we have it now, and I don't expect it to take place in the future.
Briefly, Mr. Terwilliger, what kind of road do you think the new director is going to have to hoe after all of this?
Well, this is baggage that will come with the agency, Charlene, when a new director starts, but I don't think there's any inside cabal or any other sort of disloyalty to the director or to the FBI as an institution on the part of the people who are there. I think the new director will need to carefully chart out his course and make sure that the FBI is not politicized, including making sure that people aren't whistled over to the White House to provide political cover on things like the travel office fiasco.
All right, well, Mr. Terwilliger and Congressman Edwards, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Charlene.
Finally tonight, an update on the flood situation in the Midwest. Last night, the Mississippi River set another high water record, 46.9 feet at St. Louis. The level went down a bit today, but the battle to hold back the water is certainly not over. Elizabeth Brackett reports.
In St. Charles County, the Mississippi and the Missouri rivers have cut a new channel. They now meet 20 miles further upstream. And the county that has always treasured its location between the two great rivers is now 40% underwater.
We're going to have to get more baggers on this line here. We're going to lose that.
We're not getting that many. If you got any way of getting a hold of any people, we're not getting that many people showing up today like we have had.
Well, I don't. We called yesterday. We just called all. We had ladies from our church that couldn't be here calling churches, and it was so hot. I mean, people were tired.
On the ground yesterday, the approaching crest only increased the intensity of the fight to hold back the water. Over the last 12 days, parishioners of this tiny Baptist church just north of St. Louis were joined by neighbors, friends, and strangers as sandbag by sandbag, they built a wall that stood over 7 feet tall in some spots. The exhausted Baptist minister, Ken Spilger, surveyed their work.
I'm just in awe. I have a lot of thoughts. Number one, it makes me see who's in control. We aren't. I believe God has given us wisdom. He's given us abilities and strength to try to do something about it, and take care of the resources He's entrusted to us, but we aren't going to control it.
One reason there is so much tension here is that this is not a levee. The levee is a half a mile out that way, and it was breached about a week ago. This is a wall of sandbags built by volunteers and built without the supervision or the engineering advice from the Army Corps of Engineers, and a wall they now hope will hold back the billions of gallons of water that are flowing down the Mississippi.
Organizing much of the effort was homeowner Tom Scott. A pipe fitter by trade, Scott has some construction experience, but never has he lived through something as frustrating as trying to stay ahead of the ever-rising river.
All the rain up north and out west, it just kept on going. We had to keep bagging to stay on top of it. And every day they'd tell you, well, tomorrow it'll crest at 42.5, so on. And it keeps you encouraged, but as of right now, I still don't know what's going to crest it. And that's what was really disappointing.
And yesterday morning, just before church, Scott got more bad news. The latest crest prediction was 47 feet. That would bring the water over the top of their wall. It was too much for both Scott and his wife.
I don't even live here. I woke up at 3 and couldn't go back to sleep. The guy down here, probably a week ago, said, I just wish I could go home. But he said, when I come home, this is it. It's incredible.
Then sings my soul, my Savior unto thee.
As the Sunday service began, the sandbaggers outside stuck to their task. Even inside, the river came first.
The 10 o'clock reading is 46.6 at the Corps of Engineers, and Betty Scott told us that they're forecasting, now this is unofficial, but they're looking at maybe another foot. And we need to pray. God's word teaches that we humble ourselves as we kneel.
The Lord's Scripture records many miracles. We're asking for a miracle today.
After the service, the sandbagging resumed in earnest.
Need a bagger?
But more and more water was seeping through the sandbags, and the tremendous volume of water on the other side of those sandbags was making the fire marshal nervous.
It's getting more dangerous by the minute. The longer that water is behind that wall, there's a lot of pressure. If it would give, you get...
Hi, Mr. Beadle. I told you we'd do a good job.
Oh. No. No.